We're going to get ready to start our next panel. Very important, the quality of life and human development. And if I can have the following individuals come. Pastor Wayne Lomax from the wonderful New Life Ministries Church. He's also a board member of OIC. We have some extraordinary panelists. Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer from the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Another one of our community heroes, Nan Rich. And Ms. Jacqueline Freeman, Unit Chief, Reintegration of Ex-Offenders, U.S. Department of Labor. So this is going to be a real dynamic session, so let's get ready for it. And we're going to have our moderator, Mr. Donovan Lee Sin. And just a reminder, the panel that's just left the stage, can you guys kind of move to the side so we can start the next session?
I was here, I got here about 10 o'clock and stayed till 11.
Good afternoon.
And then I had to go to lunch for a Senate candidate.
I heard one good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Berger was doing an event for her. So
Well, all the same, I'm grateful to be here and for OIC's work. And the challenge we have ahead of us is this. We are the last panel for the afternoon.
clap.
I am happy that you all are here. Yes, please. But more important than that is the job that we have to do within the next 45 minutes and the action that this and what this will activate beyond that. And so my job here is to provoke a thoughtful conversation around quality of life. If you turn in your lovely printed book here to page 24, you'll see our bios there. I will introduce our panelists one more time, but I will spare you my ability to read their bios. Instead, we'll get to the content. When I think about quality of life, I think about a few vital elements. The first is where I live, where I work, where I play, where I grow, where my kids grow, and how we succeed as a community, not just me. And that's critical. And so there's some things I want, there are 4 data points I want you to remember. And so I want to challenge you either with the lovely pens that we've been provided to write these things down. 32%, 20%, 66,000, and 87%. And everyone's looking around, well, what do these numbers mean? And the panelists alike are probably saying, what do these numbers mean? And they may have some idea, but I didn't tell them what it was beforehand. But they'll get us there, I promise you. Again, our speakers today, Pastor Wayne Lomax, lead pastor for the Fountain of New Life Ministries. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Senator Nan Rich, Chair and Coordinating Council of Broward. And Jacqueline Freeman, Unit Chief for Reintegration of Ex-Offenders, U.S. Department of Labor. My name is Donovan Lee Sin. I'm Neighborhood Services and Community Officer from the Children's Trust, which is the sister organization to our Children's Services Council here in Broward. So I mentioned some numbers earlier, Pastor Lomax. And one of the things I wanted to talk about as we think about quality of life and those experiences we have as we try to build that for ourselves and find our identity within that space, is that less than a third, 32% nationally of American households when asked if they would have sufficient funds to respond to a family emergency, only 32% said yes.
Wow.
And so, if you let that sink in, if all these chairs were full, just this section of the room would put their hands up. And so as we think about that, Pastor, what are the barriers to asset building, and what are some of the actionable solutions to address these barriers in your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Donovan, and
Sure.
good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you will stay awake with us. It's a critical question because there can be no advancement and entry into what we call the middle class without focusing on the economic issues. I think when we talk about credit, debt, asset building, the greatest barrier, or one of the greatest barriers, is what I call financial segregation. And I define financial segregation as a system that enriches the wealth and depletes the poor of assets and opportunities. And sometimes it keeps the middle class fighting or struggling and wondering whether or not we can hang on to what we have. A primary example of that, you can look at an example like the Wells Fargo scandal that we just saw, where 5,300 people lost their jobs. And so these people who were probably more middle class employees or lower wage employees lost their job while the CEO resigns, and in this same year he's sold stock for more than $90 million and profited $60 million. And so there's a financial segregation there where poor people don't have access to that type of wealth and that type of financial resource. And so assets cannot be accumulated in a competitive market, and that's what we have, when the poor lose their jobs and when the bosses walk away with big paydays. And so financial segregation prevents the poor and the middle class from significantly accessing wealth. So we have to look at what types of ways we respond to these types of things without penalizing the people who are hurt most by these types of incidents. Secondly, when we talk about credit, credit products are marketed to poor and middle class people in a way that depletes their assets. It's not in a way that enriches or builds their assets, but how credit products are marketed, they're marketed in a way that take assets and resources from the poor. And so the proper use of credit, and I think this is a critical solution or part of the solution, the proper use of credit needs to be a part of elementary and secondary educational curriculums. When you can go through school, thank you for those 2 hand claps. Yeah. We're asking people to go through schools to get a job, get a skill, to make money without the proper education to know how to manage money. Is sometimes setting people who have had no exposure to money, setting them up to failure. So marketable skills must be combined with financial literacy, and it has to be a part of our educational system. And those who are trying to penetrate into the middle class, I want to say this part, it can't be all external systems, but those who are trying to penetrate into the middle class also have to take initiative, because there's no substitute for initiative, and there's no program that is superior to personal responsibility. And each individual and community has to understand the environment in which they live in, whether that environment is favorable or whether that environment is disadvantaged. And taking personal responsibility means I have to figure out a way to advance in spite of the challenges. And the last thing I just want to say about debt is that the lower the consumer debt, the quicker a person can rise into the middle class. And this is becoming increasingly more difficult with the rise of the cost of education. And while only 5% of working adults in America, 5% of adults who are working who have a college degree live below the poverty line, it is becoming difficult to earn a degree without graduating with a mountain of debt. And for a solution for us to think about, I think we need to resurrect a Bernie Sanders talking point, and that is how to fund education. And we don't hear anything about this in the national debate now in our national presidential election. This is lost, but it is one of the most important points that we can talk about nationally, is how do we fund education. And we have to find ways of educating people without them coming out of school with $100,000 in debt, because training, whether that's college or vocational, is the best road into the middle class.
Thank you. So one thing I want to mention before we move off of this topic, and it's just a quick statistic from the Federal Reserve and as well as Bloomberg. The average debt of middle-class families is 122% of their annual income.
Wow.
So, let that sink in for a second. And this is, key when we consider what Pastor Lomax just spoke about. But considering other costs that affect our families, and I know part of the investment strategies hosted by the Children's Services Council of Broward is investments in childcare, right?
Yeah.
And when we consider all household expenses, the rate of increase of childcare since the end of the recession in 2009 till now is double that of the increase of all other household expenses. What does this mean? It means that between 2009 and 2016, the cost of childcare rose 20%. Remember that 20% number? So that said, what strategies can be implemented to address the challenges the middle class families face related to the escalating cost of childcare?
So this issue is a really complex one, in that we have competing dynamics here. You say it's gone up 20%, and you know what? If we do it right, it's got to go up even more, because the average child care worker makes less than your dog walker. And if we value that early care and education, we know that a child's brain develops at its fastest rate 0 to 5.
Yes.
Those years are vital, that the brain is stimulated, the neurons get the growth, the fodder that they need. And so truly, child care does not get the money that it deserves. I can tell you I'm a mom of a 10-year-old. It's not that long ago I was paying for child care, and I paid 3 times what we pay for as a community for subsidized child care per child. So we spend a lot of time and attention focusing on the low-income families and trying to increase the subsidy amount so that we can improve the quality of child care for our low-income children. And when I first read the question, I read it as, what is being done to help middle-class families? And I was like, oh, it's going to be a really short answer. Nothing. In fact, we're driving the cost up through these efforts to improve quality. But upon further reflection, I still have to stand by nothing is currently being done, but there are some things that can be done. We can expand the child care tax credit, so that would be a great area of advocacy. We can promote employer-sponsored subsidized child care. Mason Jackson and I have had conversations about this many times over the years. Their employers get nervous about liability, but providing that service on site, providing high quality can help your employees. It's actually really good for the employer as well, because your employees can be more focused. They don't have to wonder where their child is. If there's a problem, they can be there in minutes. They're not going to leave for the rest of the day. So that is a way that the employers can help. There is, in Florida, we do have voluntary pre-K, which right now is available to any 4-year-old, so that is helpful to middle-class families. However, it's only 3 hours a day, which is not really all that helpful for the children, and it's not really all that helpful for the family. So Nan and I have been in the trenches for years advocating to stretch that out for at least 6 hours a day. And that is a state issue, so advocacy at the state level to expand VPK, the number of hours and the quality would go a long way to helping middle-class families, at least those that have a 4-year-old. The Earned Income Tax Credit, that's something that the Children's Services Council has taken a leadership role in promoting since our first year of existence. So that has been considered one of the best anti-poverty measures that exists, and I would say continuing to promote that. We have increased the drawdown into this community by over $550 million in the last 15 years. That's money in the pockets of Broward County residents that can help them with paying for things like childcare. And then finally, one that we are starting to develop some model test cases on is there's currently the subsidy that I talked about for low-income families for childcare. There isn't enough money for it now. We have thousands of children on the waiting list, so this is a little controversial, but expanding the off-ramp, if you will. So right now, it goes up to 200% of poverty. When you hit 200% of poverty, the subsidy is done. So getting a very small raise of maybe $1,000 a year can cost you $6,000 to $10,000 in child care expenses. It's crazy. It's a disincentive for getting that raise, which is exactly counter to what we want to do. We want to encourage people to keep growing, and it's unusual to get a $10,000 raise in 1 year, especially at that level of income earner. Well, your low income to middle class family. So extending that to smooth it and make it not a cliff and extend further into lower middle class income families could go a long way. So we are, as a state association, we've gotten some foundation money that we can test this theory and see what it does to help promote that graduation into the middle class. And I hope next year I'll be able to bring you, next year, or probably take a little bit longer than a year to figure it out. But in a few years, I hope I'll be able to prove to you that that is a better way to help families with the issue of childcare.
So I promise not to, at every bullet point, iterate daunting statistics that makes us all scared to do the work. But I do want to at least raise the flag for activation. So we talk about credit, debt, asset building, childcare. Where do we all live? And can we afford to live where we live or where we want to live? Or to live close to work? So here's the thing. When we consider wage weights versus the cost of housing, and even if we were to center only on Broward County, and I live in Dade, we're not that far away, we're at the very bottom when we consider the disparity between wages and the cost of housing across all counties in the state. Remember the 66,000 number? So there's an unmet demand of over 66,000 rental units for low-income families. So we consider the seriousness of that, and we want to figure out how to grow, maintain, and have our middle class succeed. I'm hoping someone can point us to some answers, right? Senator, how can we address the challenges that employees face as they relate to affordable housing in proximity to work? I promise you I didn't set her up.
Fortunately, we have a lot of good people in this community who are working on this problem.
But, I think partially the answer is that you have to understand the problem first. And a lot of people, I think, have not been willing to recognize the extensive problem that we have in Broward County. And as was just mentioned by Donovan, when Ralph Stone, who I don't know if he's here today, but I worked with him closely on a lot of these issues now since I became the chair of the Coordinating Council of Broward, and there are a number of people in this room that have helped me and are participating in this. And I want to just maybe mention a couple of them because it shows you how we're all coming together. And that's really the most important thing, to coordinate and to understand what the problem is in order for us to be able to fix it. So I see Kim Campbell is here. She's Director of Human Services for the county. And as Commissioner-elect, I'm going to be working, I promise, very closely with her because a lot of the issues that I care about fall right under her domain. Actually, I believe she's the one that kind of connected me to Ralph Stone, who is the Director of Housing for, actually Housing Finance and Community Redevelopment for Broward. And I guess I look at him and I think I've been frustrated at certain times in my life when I've been in the legislature in a distinct minority trying to get things done or not done. And I just can't even imagine sometimes the frustration that he must feel because I believe he knows what we need to do but doesn't have the resources to do it. And I know that that's a hard thing to say because sometimes, people say, well, it's not just about money. Well, I think in this case, a lot of it is about resources. So I want to mention also, I mentioned the Coordinating Council of Broward. My friend here is the one who wrote me into getting involved in the reorganization of the CCB. We worked together on a lot of issues in the community, so I couldn't say no. I have Sandra Vesey Einhorn back there is the executive director, and she came to us with tremendous knowledge on housing issues. And Ron Drew is with the Broward Alliance. He's on our executive committee and very involved with this. And Lars Gilbert is sitting back there, and he is the director of the ALICE project from United Way, which is providing us with a lot of research and understanding of this issue and many others. But I think it just shows you the ability to bring together people from the community from all different walks. So it's not just nonprofits or governmental entities. People that sit on this CCB are heads of the hospital districts, the school board, county officials. It runs the gamut, but it also has the business community involved, which is, I think, incredibly important. I think that there are basically three areas I'd just like to briefly touch on. One, in an attempt to begin to talk about how we can address this challenge. And one is that understanding the current conditions that exist. And we are 67th of 67 counties in this state because we have the widest disparity between wages, low wages, and high cost of housing. And if you look at Miami-Dade, also, by the way, you mentioned Miami-Dade, there was just a recent article about Hialeah that has a similar problem, where over 43% of money is spent on rent or whatever the housing might be, and that is way beyond what, and that's not considering anything else in somebody's life other than just housing. So the current median home price in Broward is approximately $300,000. Comes from the Greater Fort Lauderdale Board of Realtors. And the purchasing gap between the median home price and the median income in the 15 largest cities in Broward is over $100,000. So therefore, you can see that most Broward families cannot afford to purchase a home. Wages have been relatively flat, and housing costs have increased over 50% in the last 10 years. As I mentioned, the Broward metro area is the worst. Actually, according to many statistics, it's the worst in the nation. You get in line with places like Oakland, California, San Francisco, and we are still right up there at that top echelon, unfortunately, because of what we're paying, what families are paying for their housing. When you combine transportation costs plus housing costs, the Broward metro area is the worst in the nation for cost burden for moderate income families. And I want to make a point here that the question referred to affordable housing, and I want to thank Ron Drew for this because he reminded us at a meeting that we need to put affordable workforce housing, because we're talking about people in our communities like our teachers, our professionals that protect us from harm, people who provide medical care to all of us, as well as those who work in our service sector who can't afford. And that's an issue because you have many jobs where people are not making a living wage, certainly in some of those service sectors. So these families in Broward pay 72% of their income just on housing and transportation, and that is from the Center for Housing Policy. Just wanting to know where I'm coming up with these figures. A major affordability gap exists for renters earning less than 80% of the median income. And that's why there is this unmet demand in Broward County, which is over 66,000 rental units. And it goes up every year. If you look at the chart, every year the number goes up. Broward has a net positive job creation, but many of the jobs, as I mentioned, are service sector jobs. And they add to the demand that we have for lower rental housing. I want to mention the resources that are available now that we have in Broward, and they're certainly not great. There are three key sources of affordable housing funding. There's the Federal Community Development Block Grant, that's a federal source. There's the Federal Home Grant, and there's the State Housing Initiatives Partnership, which is SHIP. Since 2006, the combined Broward County funding from these grant sources has been reduced by 60%. So in 2006, the total from those three sources was $35 million a year. 2014, it was $14 million a year. So if you wonder why these numbers are going up for people needing housing, and I have to say, when you talk about quality of life, I don't know how anyone can talk about quality of life when a person doesn't have a place to live. The other sources of funding are the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. That's a 9% tax credit financing for new low-income affordable workforce housing production. Broward receives an annual funding for approximately only 200 new units. Now, this is very striking because Dade builds over 1,000 a year. And the reason for that is that they have a special funding source that we don't have. They were able to go to their voters and get a percent of the dock stamps to be kept in Dade County. In the 12 years I was in the legislature, we couldn't get the legislature to allow to put it on the ballot to allow us to have that same referendum right here. And I think that's so wrong because we should be the ones to determine whether or not we want to tax ourselves, whether or not we want that money to go specifically to affordable housing rather than to the coffers of the state, which has happened over the last number of years with the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund, where the money has been swept out of the trust fund and goes to general revenue so that this governor and this particular legislature has been able to reduce taxes. But it comes from somewhere, and that general revenue came from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's one of the things that we're going to be focusing on along with some others for a comprehensive plan. Lastly, there was another one that was just mentioned to me today by Lars, which is called Hardest Hit, which is a federally it's a program which is run through it's run locally, and it will be funded only through 2017 because our governor has not agreed to what has to be done to enable those funds to come down to Florida. So again, in contrast, Miami-Dade produces over 1,000 new units. If you look at Orange County, And we have been able to build, since 1982, 12,799 units. Orange County and Dade has received funding for 24,000 and 31,000, respectively. So we are not getting our fair share. Now, lastly, I want to talk about solutions. There is no one silver bullet. When people say Sadowski, that's a piece of it. We need to get our fair share, but that's not going to do it by itself. So there are several things, as I mentioned. First of all, this dedicated annual source of funding from the doc stamps. Another would be to allocate a dedicated ad valorem tax. We do it in the county now. We fund part of the county's homeless program, I believe, to the tune of about $10 million. But we don't do anything like that for affordable housing. When you look at the transportation tax and the infrastructure tax, I have to say, it kind of concerns me because I think we should be putting money into affordable housing. We could create also affordable unit set-aside requirements for new residential developments. We could create, there's been talk about a linkage fee, which is a small amount, but again, I'm not advocating or not, but I'm saying we have to do what other cities like Seattle and Portland have done, and that is to create a comprehensive plan that looks at many, many different avenues to bring funding in. Dade is just looking at the possibility of approving inclusionary zoning ordinances that create additional market rate unit bonuses in exchange for affordable housing units. Employer funded or constructed housing. President Armstrong from Broward College was here this morning. They are doing that. They are building that type of employer-funded and constructed housing because they know that there's such a need on their campus for housing for students and teachers and people that have connections with the university. And lastly, I want to say that we're working on a comprehensive awareness, education, and advocacy plan. We need every single entity in this community, whether it's the hospital districts, the school board, the county, all of these agencies and not-for-profits, to go to Tallahassee this year with the same list of legislative requests when it comes to affordable housing, so that the people up there understand and know that this community is serious and that we have this problem and we want it fixed by using local, state, and federal sources. And you know what? We can do better for the people in Broward County. Thank you.
Yeah.
Clearly, I did not set her up. She was well prepared and not the only person that has a data party, right? As we think about this and we think about people, right? There are a segment of people that we mentioned earlier in the day, but we've since not really revisited the issues around this population, the 87% number. So according to the Florida Department of Corrections, their recidivism report released last June 2015, the statement is that 87% of inmates housed in Florida prisons today will one day be released back into our community, which is also their community. They were removed, but now they're back, right? So what happens there? What about reentry? What about recidivism? What about incarceration? And how do we balance, Jackie? How do we balance, how do we figure this out? What should employers do to balance the issues around liability versus finding the best fit or the best candidate and giving people a second chance?
Thank you so much. Well, I'm the last speaker at the last panel of the day. That's scary, but it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I just want to say a couple of things before I get to some solutions. This is a major problem for the United States. 1 in 3 Americans, that means everybody from this row over, have criminal records. And this is a huge barrier for employment and for not just getting into the middle class, but to get into the workforce. We're talking about people who are not working that need to be. Now, the RIO programs, which is one of the programs, or many of the programs that OIC has, does a phenomenal job with training this population, not just soft skills. I'm talking about robotics. We're talking about high-end IT. You know, we're talking about electricians and plumbers, those people you pay $50 an hour to. We train them at no cost for the employer, and they're ready to go to work. These are people that supposedly have paid their debt to society, are coming home, doing what they're supposed to do to get their lives back, get their lives in order, and they can't get hired. What we have to do is to educate, and I love the word engage. I heard that a couple of times today. Educate and engage our employers to understand this population and to welcome them as a way of taking care of or being a solution to their employment gap, their employment skills gap. We can help them with that, but they don't know enough about the population or enough about the tools that we have that will support this population. So one of the things I do want to talk about is the federal bonding program. And I'm sorry, I'm real old school. I tell a whole lot of stories, and I'm going to try to be short because I saw the 10-minute sign go up, so I'll be real brief. But with the federal bonding program, it eliminates the employer's liability for loss, for theft, larceny, that kind of thing. And what we do, providers like OIC purchase the bonds. So the employers, this is at no cost to them. They can have bonds from $5,000 to $25,000 if they think that they may be at risk of hiring this employee. Now, it's not just for people with criminal records. It's for people with bad credit. It's for people that's on temporary assistance to needy families. So anyone that's possibly a high-risk person can get these bonds. In every state, there are state bonding coordinators. We have local bonding coordinators. So you just need to reach out. And in your program, in the back of the book, there's something, a little gift from me, that looks like this about the federal bonding program. So you don't have to take notes. And the website is at the bottom. It's bondsforjobs.com. And you can find out where your state bonding coordinator is, get in touch with that person, and let them know that you want a bond for your employee if you're having problems with them getting employed. The other thing I want to talk about is our Work Opportunity Tax Credit. Now, this is not a Department of Labor program. This is through Internal Revenue Service. And this is a true story about, and I'll date myself, but I'm just going to put it out there. I've been working in this field for 40 years, so just saying. Okay, but when, yeah. So about 18 years ago, I was vice president for Goodwill Industries. And a gentleman came to me and said, I'm the director for government affairs. And this was someone who worked for a large drugstore chain. I won't mention the chain. And I was trying to figure out, why would they be coming to me and this is a drugstore? What's going on? And he says, I go all around the country to find programs like yours where we can hire employees and get the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. I said, isn't that something? So you're saving money. He said, oh, yes, it's big business. We make over $300 million a year. $300 million a year they're saving in tax credits. So they're making that money. So how many employers in the room? We have very few left. Couldn't you use $300 million a year? My goodness. So they hired a lot of employees, and they were able to have a tax credits of over $300 million a year. So that's always, during my days of being a career placement specialist, has always been in my mind. So every time I go someplace, I'm telling them, you can get money back from the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. This is something that's going to benefit your bottom line. So you have two things. If they're at risk, you can think about the federal bonding program, and generally that's not something I go in with, because I want the employers to understand that this is a viable pool of candidates that you should be considering. These people have already paid their debts to society, they've come home, they've done the work to try to get their lives on track, and now they are ready to go to work.
That's right. That's right.
So I am hearing all of these numbers in this conversation and understanding that there were some solutions or some movement towards solutions discussed in this room today, I can't be frustrated by this. And instead, I'm inspired that this is a point of activation. And, you know, I believe like you do in what's possible, because doing nothing will not make this better. But as we move from this kind of structured conversation, I want to be able to open it up to the audience to be able to ask some questions. I know we have some folks traveling around the room with some mics, and I think the first question is on that side of the room.
And I'm sorry, could I possibly say one more thing? Okay, just one more little thing. Also, what we've been encouraging states to do is to take a look at your occupational licensing. You know, it doesn't make sense that somebody can be with a criminal record can be a barber in Maryland and it can't be in Texas. Now, I'm just saying these two states arbitrarily, not that this is the case. But to take a look at what your licenses are really requiring. Does it make sense that that person cannot have a criminal record to do this job, to be a sous chef? Okay, just bring some logic to the licensing component in your states.
We have the first question from that side.
Ms. Freeman, that's a great segue into my question. One of the things that I concern myself with, I work with children who've aged out of foster or relative care. And a lot of times these young people have committed crimes that have been crimes of necessity, trying to survive. And it is extremely difficult once they've committed that crime to get them back into the workforce or even get them into the workforce period without opportunity. But the second part of that problem comes to the mental health issues and the resources that are almost none in Broward County in terms of helping them to deal with the issues that go and when I say almost none, I mean access to those resources. If they don't have the money to pay the copay or the money to afford counseling beyond what the 1 or 2 sessions that are provided for free. Getting them into the workforce and dealing with the stresses of everyday life in terms of making their lives work. Any suggestions?
Well, first I have to deal with the point about the mental health services for the children aging out of foster care. Because through CSC funding, almost every child who's aging out of foster care has the opportunity to have a life coach. And as of October 1, integrated into every single one of those programs is mental health counseling that it was available before, but they had to go somewhere else. And now it is integrated into the program. So there should be no reason for a child aging out of foster care to be in that position. That being said, and we also have very robust diversion services for kids who have committed an offense. But there still are young people who have committed offenses that go beyond what can be diverted. And that is a problem that we are working with the County Human Services Department and the community at large to see what can be done there, along with the Broward Behavioral Health Coalition. So it's not something that we are unaware of, and more work needs to be done. The good news is that through the diversion efforts that have taken place so far, we have diverted most of the children who are divertible, and what we're left with now is the hardcore group that we just have to find different solutions for. It's easy to get distracted when there's thousands of children in the way and you say, oh, if only we could. Okay, so now we have, and we did, and now we got to figure out how to deal with the tougher to reach young people, and that's in process. And then we'll hope to get them jobs. But we're trying to wrap our arms around that at this point.
Something that's new, so you're going to be the first group I really talk to about this. The Department of Labor and Department of Justice has a partnership, and believe it or not, both agencies put in money for it. The National Clean State Clearinghouse. We hope to have this up and running within the year. We just selected a contractor. But this will be a place where lawyers, practitioners, state officers can go to get information on how to set up expungement programs and to learn how to properly expunge records, and so that practitioners can learn how they can help their participants prior to going to an attorney or legal assistance get those documents in order to be able to have records expunged. Now, of course, it always helps if your states have a system of their own, and each state is different, so that's what's making it hard about this clearinghouse. But we're going to have it so that all of the information from all 50 states are in one place, so someone can go there and find out what are the laws for my state. What do I need to do? Here are some practitioners in my state that I can go to. So we can try to get some of those records expunged, sealed. There's a lot of different terms that go along with mitigating criminal records. So that's something that's going to be coming up within the next year.
Is there another question?
Hello, Armando Fana. I'm with the City of West Palm Beach Department of Housing and Community Development. Nan, you hit it right on the head with all your points in terms of the issues related to affordable and workforce housing and some of the possible solutions. And to steal a line from Al Gore, we really need to put the trust fund in a lockbox and find a way to do that so it doesn't keep getting raided, which has happened actually even before this governor, but prior to that as well. One overlooked area, and you mentioned resources. We do need resources. It is about resources when it comes to real estate and when it comes to affordable housing. One of the areas I think is somewhat overlooked is a great resource that many local governments have, both the municipalities and counties, and that's available property, land. A lot of local governments are sitting on a lot of property that have been sitting stagnant for many, many years. I think we've got to find a way to get those properties engaged in the process of affordable and workforce housing. And it's a matter of talking to local leaders. Most governments do not have the capacity to really become management agents for these properties. So maybe privatizing that effort, and we're looking at doing that at the City of West Palm Beach, and finding ways that we can either deed those properties with restrictions or sell the properties and those funds go to a trust fund, but not have these stagnant properties sitting in there that many municipalities and the county has as well.
Good idea. You know, I failed to mention one issue, and it has to do with all three South Florida counties that is going to exacerbate the housing situation even more, and that's seniors. We have a huge population of seniors in South Florida. As a matter of fact, I mean, the growth rate is from like 2010 to 2030 for the state is moving up from 8 million to 5.5 million seniors over the age of 65. So, and a lot of these people, you know, they came down here decades ago with a certain amount of money, and they bought condos. They're outliving their money. And the costs of maintenance for the condos, the cost of their drugs, everything is kind of coming in on them, falling in on them. And you see a lot of people not able to afford their housing. So this is something we're going to have to really, really look at. And I think we've been talking a little bit about some of the deed restrictions, some of the things with the condos where, you know, it's a 55 and older, but, you know, if you're not having a lot of people coming into your community and you have empty apartments, might be something to look at. So, you know, need to look at a lot of different things. But I do agree with you. The problem that I have found with the land is, and part of the reason for not having some additional housing units available is the cost of the land now. Because when we had the recession, some of the developers, some of the affordable housing, you know, companies actually were able to pick up land. People wanted to sell it, and then they were able to build on it. But not happening right now. So need to look at other. Yeah, you're talking about government-owned property. Yeah. But that's another thing to look at. Thank you.
So I've gotten the high sign, and just when we get started, we have to stop. But this is encouraging, and I'm thankful for these wise folks and their passion and desire to go the distance in this, and I want to give them a hand because that's terrific. Thank you. And as we move to the next segment, OIC really has its work cut out for it. I'm with you.
Right. Not alone.
And that's what's inspiring. And thank you all for spending this time and waiting for this last panel. And I know there's some housekeeping stuff and some other things that are going to happen after this. So thank you all very much.
A lot of the things that they lived, that they got when they came down.